I was convinced that the universe was speaking to me in numbers, and I was like, I'm either gonna win the lottery or I need to check myself into a mental hospital. In my last video, I talked about my spiritual awakening from 2017 to 2020. And in the beginning of 2020, I was in the best mental state of my life. I was so connected to my higher self, so spiritual. I had this amazing group of spiritual friends. I met the love of my life. I was just so fulfilled, so content with my life, so spiritually connected. And then COVID happened. I know there's a lot of different theories about if COVID was manufactured, made in a lab, if it was just blown out of proportion and it should have just been treated like a normal flu. And personally, I don't know what to believe. I don't have an opinion on any of that. But I do believe that the people in power, they capitalize on whatever bad things are happening and use that as a way to use fear to keep us stuck and control us. And they do this all the time, constantly. It's why everything you see in the news is pretty much bad news. Throughout history, they use fear to control us. And so I could see what was happening, and I could see that they were trying to get the collective consciousness to enter this state of fear, because I think in 2020 there was a mass spiritual awakening happening. I know a lot of other people were going through it as well, and I was like, it's not gonna work on me. I see what they're trying to do. But as the months went on, I ended up falling out of my spirituality. It wasn't the fear of COVID. Even though I had health issues, at that point in my life, I just really trusted that everything was gonna work out and that I was safe, and my higher self was telling me, everyone you know is gonna be fine, everything's gonna be fine, don't worry about it. But the combination of being isolated and the stress from my online classes, I was in a really bad living situation, and then I ended up moving back home with my family because of that, but that was really bad for my mental health. And it was just a lot of stressful events. And then I think what really did it was when George Floyd was killed and Briana Taylor. And I was just so chronically online at that point and watching all these like violent videos and seeing all this horrible stuff in the news. And it was so depressing and upsetting to me. And also to see how much action was being taken and all the protests and destruction of property and looting, which I know a lot of people do not approve of that. But personally, I mean, I didn't participate in it, but I wouldn't condemn anyone who did, because that's how change happens historically. A lot of times destruction of property and things to that extent are necessary for changes to actually be made. But I just felt like it was so discouraging and disheartening to see how nothing was being done. There were really no changes being made. I know there were some laws made and things like that, but it all just felt very performative. It didn't feel like it was actually anything substantial. And so that was really upsetting to me, because I was like, if it's not happening now, like when is it ever gonna happen? But yeah, all of that and just seeing the news put me in a really like deep depression. And that's when I realized I cannot keep up with the news if I want to be a productive member of society. But since then, I've been very mindful of like the media I consume, and I don't keep up with all the bad news going on in the world. It's really not natural to be aware of all the horrible things happening in the world. And I'm not saying to be ignorant, but if the news is making you so depressed that you can't function, you're never going to be able to do anything about all the things you want to change about the world. And I realized if I ever want to actually help people, I can't be too depressed to function. And I get too depressed to function when I see all these people dying in the news. Obviously, there's a lot of awful things happening in the world right now as well. And I'm not saying to be ignorant and just ignore it because it's not affecting you. But be mindful of what you're consuming, how it's affecting you, and then be productive in the way that you're responding to it. Like, are you doing things that are actually gonna help create change, or are you just posting a random picture on your Instagram feed? I don't need to know the details of a genocide and see horrible graphic images to know that I think it's wrong. So be aware of like what you're consuming and if it's actually helpful to you in any way, and be productive about the way that you're responding to it and the way that you're spending your time with it. Because I feel like social media is really bad in the way that it gives people this false sense that they're doing something by spreading awareness. But a lot of times when we're like posting just information about this stuff, we're actually doing nothing, but it's giving you this false sense that you're doing something. But the government doesn't care that like a million people posted something on their Instagram story. Do you know what I mean? I think it's really important to actually be productive about the ways that we're responding to this stuff in a way that's actually going to create change. But I think there is another mass awakening happening right now, and it's really important for all of us to really be mindful of what we're consuming and how we're responding to it. I think one of the best things we can do is vote with our dollar. So being mindful of what you're spending your money on and what companies you're supporting and what things that they're funding. If everyone did that, we would live in a very different world, because that's really what all these big corporations and the government cares about, is money. So if we can use our money to make a statement, that's really powerful. And we're all buying so many things every day that we don't even know what these companies stand for and what they're funding. But if we could educate ourselves on that, that can be really helpful. I think protests are great as well. If anyone else has any suggestions for ways to help, please leave them in the comments. But yeah, let's just all make sure that we're actually doing things that are actually creating change and actually helpful, and not just consuming all this bad news and feeling helpless and doing nothing with the information. But yeah, that all really pulled me out of my spiritual awakening, put me in a deep depression for a while. I would always have manic episodes for like a week where I would like feel really connected to my higher self and be really productive and have all these creative ideas. But for the most part, I was pretty depressed, and I think I still believe that like your thoughts create our reality and all that stuff. I just definitely wasn't in a high vibration the majority of the time, and I was definitely more consumed by negative emotions. My health was really declining again, and so I started to question if our beliefs create our reality, because I was like, I didn't believe that I was gonna get sick again, and I'm getting sick again. But now I realize that's because I never learned to regulate my nervous system, and so when I got back into a state of constant stress and depression and was not taking care of myself, I got sick again. And as much as spirituality is real and the power of our mind is real, there's also this really important physical aspect to life. And although we have so much influence over it, it still matters like what we're putting in our bodies, and especially what thoughts and emotions we're thinking, because I started being very stressed and thinking a lot of negative thoughts. And that's not to scare you, like it's good to have negative emotions and it's normal, but it's about having like a healthier relationship with them and letting yourself express them and letting the emotions move through your body, and then being able to return to that state of gratitude. But anyways, over winter break I worked at Target, and I was working 40-hour weeks, and it was making me really sick. It was way too much on my body. And then after a month or two of that, I had the craziest manic episode of my life where I was suddenly super energetic, mind racing, felt super healthy, super happy, and the universe was speaking to me very strongly, telling me things. And one of the things they told me was, you'll have periods of sickness throughout your life, and you'll have periods of being healthy again. And you're meant to understand a lot of different people with different mental illnesses and different physical illnesses, and you're meant to relate to them and help them. And that's why this is happening. And since I was on such a high and I was just getting this like download from the universe, I understood it, I could see it clearly, and I was like, okay, cool. I kind of just ignored it when I returned to normal life, and like didn't want to believe it. And then I thought the universe was speaking to me in numbers. Like I was having a whole conversation with the universe where they were speaking to me in numbers. Like, you know how at the store they have like numbers everywhere on all the different tags, all the different products, whatever. My last day of work, I literally spent the entire day like having a conversation with the universe, looking at numbers and like writing them down in my phone. It was really, really insane. And like each number had a different meaning and stuff. And then I was convinced that they were like giving me the numbers to win the lottery. And I was like, I'm either gonna win the lottery or I need to check myself into a mental hospital. And I ended up not winning the lottery, but the numbers that I was told were the numbers for the next day, like the winning numbers. So I took that as, okay, I'm not crazy and I don't need to go to a mental hospital, and spirituality is real and what they're telling me is real, but I'm not meant to win the lottery. And yeah, my life would be so different if I had money all this time. So I understand why everything happened the way it did. But yeah, that was like my craziest manic episode. And so I would have periods of that where I would like write a short film or start my clothing business during a manic episode and feel really connected to God and like be able to see the future. And then I would have a lot of periods of depression the majority of the time. And by the time I graduated college, I had been putting my health off so long. I'd been so stressed just trying to get all my classes done that by the time I graduated, my fatigue was really constant and my health was pretty bad. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna dedicate a year to Lyme disease treatment now, which I had done before for only a month, and it was the worst experience of my life. And I was like, I literally can never do that again. So it was scary. And it was the worst experience of my life once again. I won't go into too much detail because that's not really relevant to my spiritual awakening. But basically for a whole year, I was very depressed, very sick, did not feel like myself, felt like a zombie, felt like I did not even have thoughts. I had really bad brain fog and then just so many horrible physical symptoms. And it definitely made me question a higher power. I think I still believed in a higher power, but I stopped believing that our thoughts create our reality and that our beliefs create our reality, because I was like, I don't understand why I got sick again. But I think I still believed in a higher power, and I had to believe that I would be healthy again one day or I would not have made it through. But you know, there's always that fear that you're not going to be, because you really don't know for sure if it's even going to work, if the treatment's even working. Like, it's not necessarily a disease that everyone heals from. So that definitely changed my relationship with spirituality. And then when I started feeling healthy again, after I think it was about 9 months, where I started to have days where I felt okay, and then it turned into weeks, then it turned into months. And when I became healthy again, I was extremely happy and grateful every single day, enjoyed every single day of my life. It was just a lot easier to handle any hardships or anything, any negative emotions, because being sick is so much worse than all of that. Like anything else that life can really throw at you. I mean, I know there's a few things that are probably worse. For the most part, I was extremely happy, extremely grateful. It was like an infinite happiness glitch. I would have episodes of hypomania or mania where I would work on my clothing brand and I would get all these downloads about my future businesses and things I was going to change about the world, and get all these different ideas of things I want to do. I felt healthy. I was really grateful. I was really happy. I was really at peace for 2 whole years after the Lyme disease treatment. But I was still just stuck in this normal life, working a normal job. And I felt like I never had time or energy to see friends. And I really wanted to travel and just get more out of life. I thought my health was great, but looking back, I think that my health was not what normal people go through. I think it was still like very fragile, and I would be really exhausted all the time, really exhausted after work. But to me, it was like so much better. So I didn't really realize. My brain fog was a lot better, but it was still there a little bit. And so although my focus had kind of just been a peaceful, happy life, I was like, okay, I'm ready for change. Like, I want something to change. Let me get into manifesting again. So I wrote down everything I wanted. And then I quit this medication that I had been taking for 2 years for my insomnia, which I think probably had been blocking my third eye a little bit. And I started to feel like myself again, even more. And then about a month after I wrote down all my manifestations, and a month after I quit the medication, I got really, really sick one night, and then it just kept going, and it turned into a month of being extremely sick, freaking out, not knowing what was happening, needing it to end immediately because the symptoms were so bad, but no doctors were helping me. And yeah, I won't go into too much detail on all of that. Basically, I went through another dark night of the soul where I was praying to God every day, every second, please make these symptoms stop. Please help me. Please give me a minute of relief. Please let me sleep through the night, because I was barely sleeping because I was suffocating when I fell asleep. My therapist was like, do you notice you laugh when you talk about bad things? Anyways, I was just constantly praying, and my prayers were never answered. And I really stopped believing in a higher power. I was like, I don't see how this could be for a greater purpose. I was like, I don't see how, even if I heal myself from this, how I could ever help anyone, because how would I ever know what it is that I did exactly to heal, and that it wasn't just a coincidence. I was just questioning everything. I was like, there's no way this level of suffering is necessary, and there's no way like my soul agreed to this before I came to earth. Like, it was just such bad symptoms. It was just like being tortured in my body for months straight. And then eventually I realized I'm like allergic to everything, so then it was like weeks where I couldn't even use shampoo and conditioner and soap, and it was very dehumanizing. And I also had thousands of dollars of medical bills. My health insurance ran out. I hadn't been working for months, so I was running out of money. It was just really dark and horrible, and I felt like I was losing everything. I was like, what's the point of life? What will ever make me happy? I don't know if I'll ever be able to get on a plane and travel because I'm allergic to my car. And I was on a really restrictive diet. I was just like adding in one food each day at a time to try to see if I was allergic to it. And I couldn't use any of like my makeup, my skincare, my hair care. I realized I was reacting to all of it, and then I realized I was reacting to my clothes and like anything that's a synthetic fabric, polyester and stuff. So the majority of my clothes was making me sick. And so I was eliminating all of these things, and it was helping a little bit, but I was just like, what's the point of being alive? Like, I'm never gonna have freedom. I'm never gonna be able to do all the things I've dreamed of doing. I'm never gonna be able to work a normal job. I used to love going to restaurants, and I can't do that now. And if I were to travel, how would I even eat? It was just like this existential crisis, deep depression, horrible symptoms. Everything in my life was falling apart, and my relationship ended, and so then I really felt like I just had lost absolutely everything. I didn't even really feel comfortable opening up to my friends about how dark it was because I just felt like such a burden, and it was just very depressing and isolating. And finally it got to a point where I was so uncomfortable, so anxious, that I started researching like, how can I make this better? And I stumbled upon nervous system regulation, the placebo effect, and all these different things. And I got back into all these spiritual concepts. And I started believing that I was going to be better, that my life was going to be amazing, that all of this was happening for the best, and that things were going to unfold in the best possible way, and that I was going to be 100% healthy again, and that this was happening so I could be self-employed and I could live out my dream of traveling. And I started posting, advertising my clothing brand, which really helped me with my fear of being seen. And then I felt drawn to making YouTube videos, and I started meditating every day. I started seeing a bunch of angel numbers again and all these synchronicities. I mean, I always see angel numbers, but it really ramped up. And yeah, just like learning about all these things, getting back into spirituality really strongly, practicing gratitude daily, and really changing all my beliefs and all my negative thoughts about myself, and really improving my relationship with myself and facing my fears and building up my confidence. If you want to hear more about that, I recommend watching my video about how to unblock your chakras, because that was basically the process I went through during these months where I was going through another spiritual awakening. This has been the craziest year of my life, like absolutely the worst, darkest experiences of my life, but also the best, happiest experiences of my life. I feel like this is the best era of my life ever, and I'm the happiest I've ever been, and everything in my life makes sense, and I'm so happy everything worked out the way it did. And I even understand why I had to go through all of that suffering and why I agreed to it, which is so crazy to say because I never thought I would feel that way. But one day it's just a memory. I feel like dark night of the souls are really common with spiritual awakenings, where you kind of have this existential crisis and this ego death and are in a really dark period of your life, and then it turns into something really beautiful and really healing. And that's how growth and healing happens. Also, I know a lot of people talk about physical spiritual awakening symptoms, and I always like attribute those to just the illnesses I've dealt with, but obviously I do have a lot of physical symptoms every time I've gone through a spiritual awakening, because it always is tied with whatever chronic illness I'm dealing with at the time. Spiritual awakenings are definitely difficult, they're definitely painful, they're definitely dramatic, but in the end it's all so worth it, and it's so beautiful. But it is an intense experience. Once I changed my mindset and really started working on myself and my beliefs about the world, it really felt like reality changed again and became so much more enjoyable and so much better. I would love to hear about your spiritual awakening in the comments, or anything else you want to write about. If you want to support me, I have a clothing brand called Extant Clothing, and right now you'll get a free tote bag with every order. But yeah, that's pretty much the story of my spiritual awakening in 2024, my second spiritual awakening. My first one was in 2017. through 2020, and I have a video about that if you want to go watch that. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.